My name is Rowan Hayes. For most of my life, I've found comfort in the quiet, ordered world of words. As a freelance medical editor, my days are a steady rhythm of deleting redundancies, clarifying complexities, and ensuring that every sentence serves a purpose. My apartment, overlooking the gentle curve of Mariners Cove's harbor, is my sanctuary, a place of soft light, stacked books, and the soothing scent of brewing Earl Grey tea. It's a life I built for myself, a quiet fortress against the noise of the world, and more often than not, the noise of my own family. The Monday it all began was no different. The morning mist was still clinging to the water, blurring the line between sea and sky. I was deep in a manuscript on pediatric cardiology, fine-tuning a paragraph on atrial septal defects, when my phone chimed with a text. FYI, heading out today. All good. It was from my sister, Tessa. Terse, unadorned, and radiating a casual indifference that was as familiar as her perfume. I stared at the message, a small knot tightening in my stomach. Heading out could mean anything. A day trip to the vineyards, a last-minute weekend away. I assumed, as I often had to, that it involved our mother, Nora. Probably taking her to a specialist appointment or some other errand they'd complain about later. I didn't reply to ask for details. Experience had taught me that asking questions was an invitation for size and implications that I wasn't doing my part. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have possibly imagined, was that at that very moment, my mother was sitting in a plush armchair in the Celestial Air VIP lounge at Mariners Cove International. Her hands, worn from a lifetime of gardening and baking, were folded over the worn clasp of her handbag. Her gaze was fixed on the frosted glass doors, a soft, expectant smile on her face. She was 72, and her trust in the people she loved was as vast and unwavering as the ocean she believed she was about to cross. They had kissed her on the cheek, Tessa and her husband, Liam. Stay in the lounge, Mom. It's more comfortable here. We'll come back for you after check-in. And Nora, who had packed her brand-new swimsuit and the novel I'd given her for her birthday, believed them. Of course she did. She was a woman who saw the best in people, even when they had long stopped showing it to her. She pulled her favorite cashmere cardigan a little tighter around her shoulders, a gift from my late father, and she waited. The lounge hummed with the quiet efficiency of travel. Businessmen typed on laptops, couples sipped champagne, and the announcements for flights to London and Dubai echoed softly. Nora waited. An hour passed, then two. Her smile began to feel heavy on her face. The staff, trained in discreet observation, began to notice the small, gray-haired woman who never moved, who never ordered a drink, who simply watched the door. A young attendant, a kind-faced man with a name tag that read Finn, approached her. "Ma'am, are you waiting for a flight?" he asked gently. "Oh, yes," Nora said, her smile returning with a flicker of effort. "My children are just checking in our bags. They'll be right back." She said it with a certainty that was both heartbreaking and absolute. Finn returned an hour later, his expression now laced with genuine concern. He knelt beside her chair. "Ma'am, which flight are you on?" "The one to the Bahamas," she said, her voice a little smaller this time. "A family holiday." He nodded, but his eyes told a different story. He conferred with a colleague, a few hushed words exchanged over a terminal screen. The minutes stretched into an eternity. When he came back, he sat in the chair beside her, his posture radiating a quiet sympathy. "Ma'am," he began, his voice low and careful. "I've checked the passenger manifest. The flight to Nassau boarded over 6 hours ago. Your children, they were on it." Nora's lips parted, but no sound came out. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. It was a slow, internal folding. The light in her eyes didn't just dim. It went out, like a candle snuffed in a sudden draft. Her hands, still clutching her purse, began to tremble. She continued to stare at the door, her mind refusing to accept what her heart was beginning to understand. She had been left behind. I was still oblivious, finalizing my edits and sending off the manuscript with a quiet sense of accomplishment. My work phone was off, but my personal phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but a strange premonition, a cold prickle on my skin, made me answer. "Is this Ms. Rowan Hayes?" a polite, professional voice asked. "Yes, this is she. My name is Finn. I'm with guest services at Mariners Cove International Airport. We have your mother, Nora Hayes, here with us. She's been sitting in the lounge alone for most of the day." The world tilted. The neat, ordered lines of my apartment seemed to warp and bend. "Alone?" I repeated, my voice a hollow echo of itself. "What do you mean alone?" She said her children told her to wait while they checked in, but they never came back. "We've confirmed they boarded a flight to the Bahamas this morning." The air rushed out of my lungs. I sank onto my sofa, the manuscript I'd just finished completely forgotten. An emergency, I typed to my client, canceling a scheduled afternoon call. I grabbed my keys and my purse, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. The drive to the airport was a blur of red lights and the frantic beat of my own heart. My mother wasn't senile. She wasn't prone to wandering. Her memory, especially for things that mattered, was sharp. But my family, they had been chipping away at her for years, with a casual cruelty they mistook for pragmatism. I remembered last Christmas. "Honestly, Rowan, she's getting so slow," Tessa had whispered to me in the kitchen, loud enough for Nora to hear. "Planning anything with her is a logistical nightmare." Liam had just nodded, swirling his wine. "She's happy enough at home. She wouldn't enjoy the hassle." They weren't just words. They were justifications, paving stones on the path to this exact moment. They had convinced themselves that Nora's world had shrunk to the size of her living room, and that it was their right to define its borders. This wasn't an oversight. This was an act of deliberate erasure. I parked haphazardly in the short-term lot, not even bothering to take a ticket, and ran. The sterile air of the terminal felt suffocating. I followed the signs to the VIP lounge, my heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the polished floor. And then I saw her. Curled in the large armchair, she looked like a small, forgotten bird. Her cardigan had slipped off one shoulder, and her head was bowed, her silver hair catching the dim light. A cup of water sat untouched on the table beside her, a kindness from a stranger that she was too broken to accept. She looked up as I approached, her eyes unfocused at first. Then, recognition flickered. "Rowan," she whispered, her voice so frail it was barely audible. That single word, laced with a bewildered, childlike pain, shattered what was left of my composure. I dropped to my knees on the thick carpet. "Mom, it's me. I'm here." She reached out and touched my face, her fingers icy cold, as if to confirm I was real. "I thought they were coming back," she murmured, her gaze drifting back to the door. "They lied, Mom." My voice was thick. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling the sharp angles of her shoulders through her thin blouse. "They left you. But I'm here now." She sagged against me, a dead weight of grief and exhaustion, and we stayed like that for a long time, an island of stillness in the river of hurried travelers. I helped her to her feet, draping my own coat over her trembling shoulders, and guided her slowly toward the exit. Halfway there, I stopped. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. "Where are you? Do you know you left her here for 9 hours?" We were in the elevator, descending in silence, when my phone buzzed. It was Tessa. "Don't make this a drama, Rowan. Mom gets confused. We desperately needed a break. You know how she is. You know how she is." The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. It wasn't an apology. It was an accusation, aimed at the victim. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. "Are you all right, dear?" Nora asked, her hand finding my arm. I forced a smile. "Just fine, Mom. Let's get you home." My home. As I helped her into my car, buckling her seatbelt as if she were a child, a voice called out. "Ma'am?" It was Finn, the young man from the lounge. He approached cautiously. I just wanted to say, we have the security footage from this morning. If you need it for any reason, to document what happened. It's protocol." A part of me wanted to refuse, to shield myself from the final, ugly proof. But another, colder part needed to see. He led me to a small, windowless office filled with monitors. He queued up the time-stamped video. There they were. Tessa and Liam, walking briskly away from the lounge. Tessa was laughing at something Liam said, tucking her phone into her purse. There was no hesitation, no looking back, no sign of distress or confusion. They moved with the unburdened purpose of people who had just shed a heavy weight. It was clean. It was calculated. It was unforgivable. "Turn it off," I said, my voice hoarse. He clicked the screen to black. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Me too," I muttered and walked away. Back in the car, Nora was humming softly, a fragment of an old lullaby she used to sing to me. She smiled as I got in, a fragile, watery smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry you had to leave your work," she said. I didn't answer. I just took her hand, its familiar network of veins and soft wrinkles a painful reminder of all the love she had given, and all the love that had just been thrown away. As I pulled out of the airport and merged onto the highway, a quiet, cold vow formed in the deepest part of my soul. They would not get away with this. They had drawn their line. Now, I would draw mine. "I knew you'd come," she murmured, her head resting against the passenger window. I drove on, my jaw clenched and my heart burning, silently planning. They had forgotten her. But I would make sure they would never, ever forget me. I led my mother into my apartment, the air thick with the unspoken. She hesitated at the threshold, as if worried she might track in the dust of her own abandonment. "You can put your bag down anywhere, Mom," I said gently. "This is your home now." She gave a faint, ghost of a smile and allowed me to guide her to the sofa. I wrapped a soft throw blanket around her legs and went to the kitchen to make her favorite chicken and rice soup, the aroma of ginger and simmering broth slowly filling the silence. But when I placed the bowl before her, she only stirred it listlessly, her reflection wavering on its surface. "Maybe their flight was changed," she said, her voice thin. "Maybe they tried to call." She was building a bridge back to a world where she wasn't discarded, a world that no longer existed. "Their phones work in the Bahamas, Mom," I said, my voice softer than my thoughts. Her shoulders slumped. "I suppose they do." We sat in a quiet that was heavier than any argument. To break it, I tried to steer her toward the past. "Remember that little blue dress you sewed for me for my 5th birthday? The one with the daisy chain on the collar?" A genuine light flickered in her eyes. "You spilled grape juice all over it before we even got to the party. You cried for an hour." We shared a small, fragile laugh, but it faded quickly, and the silence returned, heavier than before. Later, after she'd fallen into an exhausted, fitful sleep on the couch, I retreated to the kitchen with my laptop. The cold fury from the airport had settled into a hard, methodical resolve. I still had connections from a brief stint in corporate security consulting years ago, contacts I rarely used. A single, encrypted email to a data analyst I'd once done a favor for was all it took. The subject line was simple: Flight Manifest Request. Celestial Air 486. Today. The reply came in less than an hour. The attached PDF contained the final boarding list. I scrolled down, my finger tracing the alphabetized names. Foster Tessa. Foster Liam. My breath hitched. I scrolled again, slower this time. There was no Nora Hayes. Not on the main list, not on the standby list, not even on the list of canceled tickets. They never bought her a ticket. The realization landed like a physical blow. The entire story, the trip, the excitement, her packed bag sitting in my hallway, was a meticulously crafted lie. They had performed this elaborate theater just to get her out of the house, to deposit her somewhere public, and to disappear from her life. It wasn't just abandonment. It was a disposal. The knot in my chest ignited. I grabbed my phone and dialed Liam's number, my thumb jabbing the screen. He answered with an infuriatingly casual, "Rowan, what's up?" "You never even bought her a ticket," I said, my voice dangerously low. He sighed, a long-suffering sound that set my teeth on edge. Look, it was getting impossible. She wasn't going to enjoy the trip. All the walking, the sun, she would have been miserable. It was kinder this way. Kinder? To leave her alone in an airport for 9 hours, thinking she was going on a holiday you never planned for her. "Don't be so dramatic," he scoffed. "We figured you'd pick her up eventually. You always do. She's your favorite, isn't she? You're the one who's good at all the emotional stuff. We figured you'd pick her up." The premeditation was chilling. They had used my love for her as part of their exit strategy. I was their cleanup crew. My throat went dry. I couldn't speak. I just ended the call, the silence that followed roaring in my ears. I walked back into the living room and watched my mother sleep. Her purse had tipped over on the coffee table, its contents slightly askew. As I reached to zip it closed, I saw a small, cream-colored envelope tucked inside. My name was on it, written in her familiar, elegant script. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a simple card with a watercolor painting of a robin on the front. Inside, she had written, "Dearest Rowan, thank you for always seeing me. You have a kindness in you that others mistake for weakness, but I have always known it is your greatest strength. I hope this trip helps us all reconnect. I love you more than words can say. Love always. Mom." It was dated 3 days ago. 3 days before they drove her to the airport to abandon her. She had written it full of hope, believing in a family that had already written her out of their lives. A tear escaped and slid down my cheek, hot and sharp. I carefully folded the card and slid it back into its envelope, tucking it deep inside her purse. She would not need to know I had seen it. The pain of its existence was enough for one of us to carry. I spent the rest of the night on the armchair opposite the couch, watching over her. This wasn't just about a vacation. This was a severing. They had taken a pair of scissors to the family tapestry, and they didn't care who unraveled. I would not let it be her. As the first pale light of dawn crept through the blinds, I made a new promise, not to her, but to myself. No more excuses. No more peacemaking. No more pretending. They had left her. I would not. The next morning, I woke to a sharp, insistent knock on the door. Not the friendly rap of a neighbor, but something official, authoritative. When I opened it, a woman in a crisp gray suit stood there, holding a clipboard. "Good morning," she said, her smile polite but distant. "I'm Ms. Albright from the Department of Elder Services. We received an anonymous report of concern regarding your mother, Nora Hayes. May I come in?" My blood ran cold. Anonymous. Of course. This was their next move. "The report," she said, her eyes scanning my small, tidy apartment, "alleges potential elder abduction and emotional coercion. It suggests she is being isolated from other family members and that there may be financial exploitation involved." I felt the floor drop out from under me. It was so vicious, so perfectly twisted. They had abandoned her, and now they were painting me as her captor. "My mother is right there," I said, gesturing to the living room where Nora was just waking up, blinking in confusion. "Please, ask her yourself." Ms. Albright's interview was gentle but thorough. Nora, with a quiet dignity I hadn't seen in years, recounted the events at the airport. Her voice didn't shake. She simply told the truth. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice. I opened my laptop. "Here," I said, turning the screen toward the social worker, "is the text from my sister. Here is the call log from the airport. Here is the flight manifest from Celestial Air, showing no ticket was ever purchased in my mother's name. And here is the voicemail from my brother-in-law, explaining that they assumed I would handle the situation." Ms. Albright reviewed everything in silence, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up, a flicker of something human in her professional gaze. "Ms. Hayes, what I see here is a daughter who stepped in during a crisis. The report's allegations appear to be unfounded." She stood, handing me her card. "These situations can be complex. When one sibling takes on the care, sometimes others react poorly. If they try to escalate this, you call me directly." After she left, I leaned against the closed door, my body trembling with a rage so profound it felt like grief. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was war. That Sunday, Nora turned to me as we were finishing breakfast. "I want to go to St. Jude's," she said. St. Jude's was the church she had attended for 40 years. It was where Tessa and I were confirmed, where my father's memorial had been held. It was the heart of her community, a community that had been hearing Tessa and Liam's carefully curated version of the story for weeks. "Are you sure, Mom?" I asked. "I am not going to hide, Rowan," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "I have done nothing to be ashamed of." When we walked into the sun-drenched sanctuary, a ripple went through the congregation. Whispers followed us down the aisle like a trail of smoke. We sat in a pew near the back. I could feel the weight of 100 pairs of eyes. Halfway through the sermon on forgiveness, the side door creaked open. Tessa and Liam slipped in, dressed in their Sunday best. Tessa made a show of spotting us, her face a mask of manufactured relief. "Mom," she stage whispered, loud enough to turn heads. "Oh, thank God. We've been so worried." She started toward us, Liam trailing in her wake, his face a stony mask of feigned concern. But before she could reach us, Nora stood up. She didn't look at Tessa. She faced the pulpit, her posture straight and her hands clasped in front of her. The pastor paused. The entire church went silent. "I need to say something," Nora said, her voice clear and carrying in the hallowed quiet. She turned slightly, not to her daughter, but to the community that had known her for decades. "You have all heard that I have been unwell, that I am confused," she began. "Last Monday, my children drove me to the airport. They told me we were all going on a holiday. They left me in a lounge, and they boarded a plane without me. There was no ticket for me. There was no plan for me. There was just silence." A collective gasp swept the room. I waited for 9 hours, believing they were coming back. They did not. It was my other daughter, Rowan, who came for me. The daughter who you have been told is keeping me from my family. She finally turned her head, her gaze sweeping over Tessa and Liam, who were frozen in the aisle. I am not confused. I have never been more clear. I have been made to feel like a burden for years, but it took being left like a piece of lost luggage for me to finally see the truth. I am not ashamed of what happened to me. I am only ashamed that I didn't see it sooner. She sat back down. The silence was absolute for a moment, and then an elderly man in the front row began to clap. Then another. And another. Soon, the entire sanctuary was filled with applause, a wave of validation and support that washed over us. Tessa's face went white. Without another word, she and Liam turned and fled. Outside, in the bright sunlight, Nora took a deep breath, as if she were breathing fresh air for the first time in a long time. The weight hadn't vanished, but it had shifted. It was no longer hers to carry alone. That evening, the phone rang. It was a man with a smooth, baritone voice. "Miss Hayes, my name is Mr. Sterling. I was your late father's attorney. A matter concerning his estate has come to my attention that I believe requires your and your mother's immediate presence." I looked at my mother, who was peacefully knitting in her armchair. The quiet battle had been won, but I had a sinking feeling the war had just entered a new, more treacherous phase. The law office of Sterling and Associates was on the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, a world of muted grays, polished chrome, and the hushed reverence of expensive litigation. Nora sat beside me in the plush client chair, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She seemed smaller in this environment, but not fragile. There was a new stillness about her, the quiet resilience of a tree that has weathered a great storm and remains standing. Mr. Sterling, a man in his late 60s with kind eyes and a weary smile, sat across from us at a large mahogany desk. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice," he began, steepling his fingers. "Nora, as you know, I handled Robert's will after he passed 3 years ago. The original document, which he signed in my presence, was very clear. You were the sole beneficiary of his estate." He paused, his gaze apologetic. "However, a new document was filed with the probate court 6 months ago. A codicil to the will." He slid a sheaf of papers across the desk. I picked it up. The legalese was dense, but the conclusion was starkly clear. It redirected the entirety of the Hayes family trust, the house, the investments, the savings, to be split equally between Tessa and Liam Foster upon Nora's passing, and gave them immediate control over all financial decisions as her legal fiduciaries. "I never signed this," Nora said, her voice flat. She was looking at the signature line at the bottom. "That's not Robert's signature. It's close, but it's not his." "We suspected as much," Mr. Sterling said grimly. "We had a forensic analyst look at it. It's a highly skilled forgery. The witnesses who signed off on this document were your daughter and your son-in-law." The air in the room grew thin. They hadn't just tried to abandon her, they had been systematically erasing her from her own life, securing her assets before she was even gone. My father had trusted them, and they had used that trust to disinherit his wife. "What can we do?" I asked, my voice tight. "We can fight it," Mr. Sterling said. "But it will be a long, ugly, and very public battle. They will paint Nora as incompetent, confused. They will use her age against her at every turn." Nora looked down at her hands, then back up at Mr. Sterling. A quiet fire burned in her eyes. "Let them," she said, her voice unwavering. "I don't care about the money. Let them have the house, the stocks, all of it. But I want the truth to be told. I want it on the record that my husband's will was forged by his own child." She looked at me. "I don't want revenge, Rowan. I want justice. Not for the estate, but for his memory." The decision was made. We would not sue for the money. We would file a petition to invalidate the codicil on the grounds of fraud and forgery, a move designed not to reclaim wealth, but to restore truth. A few days later, an email arrived from Tessa. The subject line, "A family dinner." The message was sickeningly sweet, full of talk about healing, misunderstandings, and the importance of moving forward. They wanted to meet at a ridiculously expensive restaurant downtown. It was a trap, a performance, a way to control the narrative. "We should go," Nora said, when I showed her the email. "Mom, why?" "Because," she said, placing her teacup down with a decisive click, "they are expecting us to hide. They are expecting me to be a victim. I am going to show them who I am now." So we went. The private dining room was opulent and suffocating. Tessa, dressed in a silk blouse, rushed to hug Nora, a display of affection so false it was almost artistic. Liam stood awkwardly by, offering a stiff handshake. They had invited a few other family members, an aunt, a cousin, as witnesses to their magnanimity. After the wine was poured, Tessa raised her glass. "To family," she said, her eyes glittering. "And to putting the past behind us." I raised my glass. "To truth," I said, my voice clear and calm. "And to ensuring it always comes to light." The mood shifted. Before anyone could speak, I placed a slim folder on the table. "Before we order," I said, "I believe we have some business to discuss." I slid a copy of the forensic handwriting analysis across the table to our cousin, a quiet but respected tax attorney. "Page 3 is the most interesting part." Tessa's face paled. "Rowan, this is not the time or the place." "You forged my father's signature," I said, keeping my voice even. "You tried to steal my mother's home. You left her at an airport. I'd say this is precisely the time and the place." The room fell silent. Our cousin looked up from the report, his expression one of cold disgust. "Tessa," he said quietly, "this is a felony." Just as Tessa was about to erupt, my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Sterling. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. "Rowan," he said, his voice urgent. I was going through Robert's archived files, clearing out an old digital storage locker. "I found something. It's an audio file." He labeled it for Nora in case of emergency. My heart stopped. "Play it," I whispered. He did. My father's voice, raspy and familiar, filled the line. "Nora, my love, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone and things have gone wrong, just as I feared they might. Tessa and Liam, they came to me. They talked about investments, about protecting the estate. They had me sign some papers. I was tired that day, not thinking clearly. I trusted them. But a part of me knew. I made this recording the next day. Nora, I never would have cut you out. Never. The house, everything, it's yours. It was always meant for you. Rowan, honey, I know you'll know what to do. Protect your mother. Let this be my real last testament. Let this be my voice." The recording ended. I stood frozen in the hallway, tears streaming down my face. He had known. He had suspected their betrayal and had left behind a final, loving shield for my mother. I walked back into the dining room. All eyes were on me. I didn't say a word. I simply placed my phone on the table and hit play. My father's voice filled the oppressive silence. Tessa's face crumpled, the artifice falling away to reveal the ugly, grasping person beneath. Liam stared at the tablecloth as if it held the secrets to the universe. When the recording finished, Nora stood up, her face etched with a profound sorrow, but also with peace. The last shadow of doubt had been erased. Her husband had not betrayed her. "We're leaving," she said quietly. She walked to the door, and I followed, leaving them all sitting in the wreckage of their own making. The story, now bolstered by the audio file, broke. A local news station picked it up after the court filing went public. They came to our apartment, a reporter with kind eyes and a quiet cameraman. Nora sat in her favorite armchair and told her story, not with anger, but with a simple, heartbreaking clarity. "I don't want anyone's pity," she said, looking directly into the camera. "I want people to look at their own mothers, their own fathers, and remember that they are not burdens. They are the people who gave you everything." The segment went viral. Our quiet street was suddenly lined with news vans. But more than that, letters and emails poured in from all over the country. People shared their own stories of elder neglect, of financial abuse, of the quiet, creeping loneliness that afflicts so many of our elderly. A woman from Ohio sent a knitted blanket. A retired lawyer from California offered his services pro bono. A group of college students started a GoFundMe, not for us, but for a new cause. One evening, I found Nora sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by letters, a small, genuine smile on her face. "I thought I was alone, Rowan," she said softly. "But it turns out there are so many of us." And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I took the inheritance I would one day receive, the money they had tried so hard to steal, and I started a foundation. We called it the Nora Project. Its mission was simple: to provide legal advocacy, emotional support, and emergency resources for elderly individuals facing neglect and fraud. Our first initiative was a volunteer program called Gate Guardians, a network of people to accompany seniors at airports, ensuring no one ever had to wait alone again. Tessa and Liam faded from our lives. They settled with the court, their reputations in tatters, their names synonymous with a particularly shameful kind of greed. I heard they moved away. I did not care to find out where. Our lives became quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the silence of loneliness, but the peaceful hum of purpose. Our apartment became the Foundation's first headquarters. Nora, as the official chairwoman of correspondence, spent her afternoons answering letters, her handwriting once again firm and full of life. One sunny afternoon, I came home to find her on the porch, watching a robin build a nest in the old oak tree. She looked up at me, her eyes clear and bright. "You know," she said, "for a long time, I felt like my life was over. A story that had already been written. But you gave me a new chapter, Rowan." I sat beside her, taking her hand in mine. It was warm. "No, Mom," I said, watching the robin weave a twig into its new home. "You gave it to yourself. I just helped you find the words."